This is Harry Gines, case number 9910-255. Harry Gines versus the United States. We're here today to bring a sequel to a video that was produced for Women's Month 2019. Now, our feature cover for this video, I've selected a magazine by the name of Stars. You may remember Stars, but this particular female general, this is very important for this video. This is the cover page for the video that you're about to watch. Now, having this high-ranking woman to be able to lead the path, that really helps a lot when you have so much precedent to set. There's a lot of precedent that women are trying to set these days under equal rights, and Harry Gines versus the United States is only here to help and to assist you, because there would be some women who would be interested in the military, but yet others would not be. So trying to get those clauses in order. That's very important, to get all your clauses in order as for what you expect when it comes to equal rights. As I spoke in the last video concerning women's rights, it was brought to the attention that the Pentagon on Google, very recently has made some decisions that involve women being drafted. So because of that, I laid a lot of foundation in the previous video, but we can't go over every detail that was the last video covered. You would have to be able to do your own time travel and look that up. But today, this video is concerning reparations, equal rights of women, and the military. You know, this is something that we really need to lay a strong foundation as for your position. Those who would be interested and those who wouldn't. That is the same quandary that the men have been facing for centuries, actually. It's been centuries that this has been going on, as far as slaves and those who chose to fight voluntarily. But yet when it comes to the draft, that is something where the line needs to be understood. You know, you just can't just, every woman may not be equipped for that type of career. So those women that can, you're very special. You're very special. And we're not trying to take away from what your interests are, those who are interested. We're not trying to take anything away from you because you are interested. You see, but that's a very narrow line. It's very narrow. You see, that's not something that should be so broad. Now, with that being said, I'm here today to bring a feature presentation entitled The Black Soldier. The Black Soldier is something that dates back to the beginning of this country with George Washington. It actually goes that far back. So under reparations, there are people who are entitled, not so much deserving, but are entitled to reparations. Now, all the battling prior to Abraham Lincoln, that was something that was setting up your freedom. It was just setting it up. But now that it became full blown under Lincoln, something happened once Lincoln was assassinated. But before we go into all of that, we need to lay a lot of legalities as far as the film itself and giving some credence some respect and bringing the law into what Harry Gines is doing. You see, I'm showing a film that has copyrights from other companies, such as CBS. So I'm really honored to be able to be in such company to be able to present such a film under the fair usage. There's a copyright clause there that allows people to use other artists' material, as in excerpts, or if the material is in accordance with what the film was about. So that is what I'm trying to establish here. I'm trying to establish that my dialogue, my presentation, my narrative is all in the forefront before the film even shows. You see, you don't want to get into things that, people are pirating. I'm not a pirate. I'm not a pirate, okay? That's not what I'm here to do. But yet, under legal terms, it is possible, and other companies have done this. Authors, they always give reference to where their material has come from. That is where the legality, as from one author to another, is acceptable. So that is where I want to be. I want to be on the page of getting this presentation off the ground without having anything of a backlash for anybody. Because it can be kind of shocking, this movie that I'm about to show. It can be, if you really feel the spirit of it. There is a spirit within this movie, and hopefully it will touch you. When you really see how in-depth the path is, real lengthy path of fighting, for this country of the United States. And like I said before, this is deserving. Now, I mentioned CBS, but also Bill Cosby has been involved with this movie. So, it is just an honor for me just to get among those who have done great works in the motion picture industry, to be able to come forth and let my presentation be connected to Harry Gines versus the United States up under my masters. I have over 20-something videos. So this now, I'm hoping that everyone will understand the fair use law. Fair use law under copyright. That's very important. So it being placed in my masters because of my dialogue, that is how it works. You see, I'm using excerpts from the film. So there's no harm done here. Any monetary awards coming, or monetary proceeds coming forth, all of that can be worked out. But as it stands right now, everything is just out of pocket. And that pocket being Harry Gines, just plain Harry Gines. Harry Gines is out of pocket bringing this presentation to you all. But I assure you, every woman in the world, you've been worth all the money that I spent on this. So I do hope you enjoy it, but it's something that I'm taking from the 20th century, hoping to bring an upgrade into the 21st century of this film. That is why my dialogue is here, trying to show how this can be used effectively in the 21st century. You see, time, there's a time travel with everything. And if you let certain works, whether it's the motion picture industry or even just in labor itself, everything has to have an upgrade to it. That's how things work. You just can't leave something and expect it to say, it's okay like that, because there are other inventors that will come along and advance on an invention. So it's the same thing when it comes to the motion picture industry, as well as authors, who do the same thing that I'm doing right now. In fact, it's the Phoenix Learning Group. They have this film produced by CBS. They have a website that connects if those who would want to purchase it and viewing it. You know, that's what they do. So with that being said, I'm not doing anything different than what's already been done from other companies. Other companies have done this. I mean, try it this way. If you in the music industry, if you ask yourself, how many people sang I Heard It Through the Grapevine? You know, every artist back in the 60s had a piece that he sang of that song called I Heard It Through the Grapevine. You know, but as long as everything was in order, it was okay for that new artist to come along and sing the same song. I mean, Elvis Presley himself, you know, was back in the 50s and 60s, and he was also a military man drafted. You see, so he sang songs, you know, by plenty of black blues singers. You see, yes, you know, so, you know, when that happens, that, you know, you give that credence to the old artists, and then you do your version from it, and then it's part of your masters, you see. Yes, but it will always be that one part there that you were not the originator of the piece, but yet you did an upgrade of your version of it. That's what this is about. The Black Soldier Today, that is the name of the film that I'm bringing to the world. You see, it's The Black Soldier. Now, with that being said, I had mentioned the Phoenix Learning Group. I've mentioned CBS, Bill Cosby, and there was another one. I think it was the company went by BF. There's a BF, maybe Black Film. You know, they may been involved with this as well. You know, the BFA. They were also involved in the producing of this film. So everyone has to have their credence gave at the beginning of a piece that I'm about to show. So with that being said, I would like to go to the presentation of The Black Soldier. Thank you, and stand by.
The United States Army in Vietnam. During the last 200 years, the American military has fought 8 major wars around the world. The source of its strength remains the same: men, young men.
I'm getting a little busy, so if I don't make it, just wish me luck, okay? I'm gonna go on with this room, you're gonna just stay with the middle, man. Get my back.
American fighting men 10,000 miles away from New Haven and Watts, fighting another war. White men, black men. Today they fight as equals, and long before the violent birth of our nation, black men died in American wars. They died as equals, but they were not always allowed to fight or live as equals. In most history books, the story of the black men in battle is usually ignored. Now, true history has many surprises. This monument on the Boston
Now, that was an introduction trying to show the title of the original film was Black Soldier. Now, that was a pretty rough start of the movie. It's very rough starting. You have to keep in mind, I told you that the dates, of the film itself is more like, and even mentioning Bill Cosby, as you saw, I mentioned it. This film was probably produced more like in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, which now that we're at, going into 2020, that's a long time, to go back to that era of the 60s and 70s. That's a long time, especially when you start talking about film. Film has a way of decomposing, and you lose all your film pictures that was, shot, you lose it all. So it's necessary for things to be upgraded into the 21st century. And that is what Harry Guines is attempting to do. And like I said, it's nothing different than what other artists and other authors, other companies, they use other people's material as a reference. That is what I'm trying to say. Now, with that, I'm going to go back, but we're going to do a fast forward, because I mentioned George Washington as far as, the Revolutionary War is concerned. Slaves were involved in that. They were slaves. George Washington still used slaves. So I'm going to fast forward that not because I want to take something away from the movie, but as the fair usage speaks on excerpts. You see, so I gave you the front part, as far as giving my credence to who produced it, but we're going to try to get more into, the film starts at Vietnam, and it ends with Vietnam. It's like a synopsis of every war. That's why I was really impressed with the movie. But the condition of the movie and the sound of the movie, you would have to pay very close attention, to try to feel the spirit of the film. Because if you're just trying to look for something as nice as we have it today with the clarity and then the audio sound that we have today, so crisp and clear, you're not going to have that. No, this is a 16 millimeter film projector. So they were, if you've been in a classroom, if you ever been in a classroom, so this could be kind of nostalgic for some people, but they would understand the sound. They would understand how that would be, a challenge, especially trying to bring it into the 21st century, as well as the picture itself, getting some clarity from that. There's some screens today that are just so crystal clear that you could hear anything, as well as, picking up any little object or something within the screen of the picture. No, you're not going to get that. This is 21st century technology, and the film is not in bad shape. Actually, it's in good shape. There are some film out there that I've been going through that, I don't even want to run through my projector. That's just how, damaged they are. When you review these old films, so they really need some care. They need some attention. And that's what I've been doing, and I'm trying to not let the footage get lost, because that's what happens. It would just basically deteriorate, the sound and everything will get worse and worse as years pass. But if no one ever does that, then it would be a lost cause. And plus you have to think of when this film is showing, I'm going to turn it back on again. So when I turn it back on, you got to keep in mind, whoever was taking the picture from like in the 40s, and going back to the 20s and, actually showing maybe slaves, when you really start looking at footage like that and to think that, well, if I don't rescue this film, it's going to get lost forever. So no, we really need to look at the path as to be able to leave something for the next generation. That's very important. Like I said, whether this makes me, any money at all, the women of the world are worth whatever I spent for, dressing nice for you guys to come out here, whatever it takes. That's what I want to make sure that I'm bringing the best that I possibly can bring to all women of the world. That is very important. Okay. And by the way, again, that's why I say that my dialogue to this has to have some importance for all the legalities. This is not a hoax. I am Harry Guines versus the United States. That's who I am. And this is not a hoax. You have to keep in mind, for someone to be able to litigate at the Supreme Court level, that says something, okay? Because, to get a writ of certiorari, to even think that yours would be accepted, that is a great feat, that I am proud of. Whether whoever won't understand it, but it's simple to understand. It really is. I mean, if you file something, everybody's filed something one way or another, and what happens? They stamp it filed, okay? But that doesn't mean that you made docket, though, when it comes to the courts. Yes, the court received your document, blah, blah, blah. Yes, and they stamped it filed, that's fine. That's the end of the rubber stamp right there. But to actually say that your case was accepted for a writ of certiorari, like on the same scale of Roe versus Wade, you see, it had to be accepted. And once you will know that this document is authentic, because there would be no need to contact any of the parties involved in this case if it didn't make docket. You see, so that's what I want to show you, to make sure we understanding, the importance of Harry Guines versus the United States, because it could be a piece of legal work that you could use to make a difference in you being drafted. Yes, this could help. This is not a hoax. I'm not here trying to duke something up to trick anybody. That's not what this is about. I'm not trying to trick anybody. I'm I'm a pro se litigant. That's what I am. Now, whether the world wants to accept me as a right along with Johnny Cochran and all the rest of them, well, Johnny Cochran hasn't done some of the things that Harry Guines has done. And a lot of these attorneys that are out here, a lot of them haven't done what Harry Guines has done. Okay, so if that means anything, that I'm comparing myself to people who haven't done what I've done, that's what I have to go through. Yeah, it's a lot of big titles out there, a lot of big names out there, but when it's all said and done, have you a writ of certiorari approved by Congress? Do you have that? Okay, now you can talk about all the cases you won, blah, 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 but have you a writ of certiorari approved by Congress? Do you have that in your resume? Okay, so that's what I want you to know, who I am and what I'm bringing to the table. So with that, the women of the world need to recognize, okay, I can paint a scenario for you. Okay, now the scenario would be, let's just say that women were drafted, that it actually went down. Okay, so how does that affect the world? Well, it affects the world because the United States military bases are all over the world. And now there would be women on the front line, there to support whatever violence that the country is trying to bring a cease to. Okay, now what I'm trying to say is, if you took Israel and Palestine, well, you were used to seeing males over there, with the M16s and this type of thing. Well, now you would have women there. So yet now, wherever the conflicts are arising, now there's women there. You see, so yes, women would be what you would have to fight, as an opposing party. So keep that in mind. No, this is very serious. Everyone in the world should recognize the United States women on Google. If you look at it, it's very simple, to find today that women by the Pentagon are being sought in thought for the military service under being drafted. So that is serious. That's very serious. Okay. So with that being said, and I've shown you my papers that could possibly bring you to an understanding with the government as for your clauses of equal rights. Now, do you see how the connection is really coming to you that you could use? If you just want to sit back, you can do that too. But always remember, somebody tried to outline something that maybe in the future, once you get that draft number, well, see, it's too late then. Right. It's really looking, unfavorable for you that you would not want that, but yet you stuck with it now. Yeah, that's how that would be. So if I can get back to the movie so we can kind of like fast forward and try to get past some of the early years of being a slave, but yet when we were free, how were we treated? How were things being handled? Were you a citizen or were you a U.S. non-citizen? You see, because if you're a U.S. non-citizen, as I have said before, there's no such person in the U.S. military that is a non-citizen. Lincoln made sure of that, and as time passed, there is a term. That term should be the ex post facto clause. Under the ex post facto clause, it states that no law should be made harsher than it was in the beginning. So as you're chasing the origin of the ex post facto clause, again, make no law that was harsher than it was in the beginning. And that is the basis of Harry Gynes versus the United States. That is the basis of it. That is what happened once Lincoln was killed. The ex post facto laws were violated to do away with Lincoln's writings, and the next president changed what Lincoln wrote, which under the ex post facto clause made all black people's lives harsher than it was in the beginning, based off what Lincoln wrote. It's very simple. I don't make it hard. The thing that makes it hard is that for years after Lincoln's death, no one knew what he wrote. Until to date, it's still the same quandary. You start talking about Lincoln, all of a sudden, everybody wants to turn and go the other way. The origin is easy to find. But yet, president after president came along and saw how it would be to their advantage to do certain things with black people. And I mean, just from the start, the labor system. I mean, it's even writings that I have from the Congressional Globe that even states that it wasn't to the best interest of the country to have black people not under a labor status. You see, you just can't be wandering around like a nomad. No, they didn't want that. They wanted to keep you wherever you was in a labor status. You see, because if you were a nomad, that meant that you could wander around searching and searching till you found what you was looking for, like most of the free people did. So you never had the entitlement to even wander as a nomad. You see, you stayed free, but you wanted under the congressional globes stating that under the labor status, see, it wasn't for the country's best interest for you to be a nomad. And that's what happened. You see, let me get back to the film, because that is why the dialogue to this, I won't try to narrate the film. I'm just going to fast forward it so that the excerpts are clear that I'm under all of the fair usage, so that YouTube, because we haven't even mentioned YouTube yet. You know, this is all about YouTube. There are other people that you have to, how do you say, they have rules. You see, they're the publisher of this video. YouTube will be. You know, they're the ones that's going to be the collector and keeping my masters. You see, this is going to be part of my master file. It's very important because as time passes and someone wants to research something, you know, they can go straight to Harry Gines. Harry Gines will lay it out from this film, so you'll be able to say, well, wait a minute, you know, maybe that flag thing that we do when we on a knee, well, now maybe you can understand why so many people that are black don't go for that. No, we fought too hard to have people enjoying their livelihood today. That's what people do. They enjoy their livelihood off the battles that black people fought so that they can have that. Yes. So your lives would never be as easy as it is today if somebody didn't fight for it. Yeah. And that's what happened. Somewhere along the way, you have forgotten the black soldier. And let me just show you one. Now, I know this is about women. I know, but like I told you, you said so much precedent that it would be hard to find, you know, wounded women. But that's coming if you keep allowing, you know, Congress to do as they do. But here's one that I think we should all, you know, salute, you know, and understand that this is really, if this can't touch you, you know, because this is what you're going to go up against. This is what you're involving yourself with when you're speaking of the military. So I just want to present this veteran, whoever he is, you know, that you are included in this women's rights, because this is what they say they want. I want to make sure they understand what they say they want. Now look at it and be sure that you can say this is what you want. Okay. But this veteran right here, whoever he might be, you know, my hat, my salute goes out to you. You will never see me on my knees. You know, with veterans and gentlemen like that, who I know have fought to make everybody's lives better as we see it today. No, a lot of people reap the rewards, but yet they show no type of compassion for the people who made it possible for them. You know, and that's really a shame. That's really a shame. And to see, you know, how easy people want to make mockery, you know, and you talk about taking a knee. No one's trying to tell you can't take a knee, but people just didn't come to see that. So if you want to take a knee, you could have did that in your locker, you know, your locker room. You could have did it back there. You could even went to your own place, you know, rather than making a spectacle when you come out to play the game. That's what you were paid to do. You know, I mean, no. Jackie Robinson, You know, he was a veteran. A lot of these people, Joe Louis, he was a veteran. You see, so we have a long list of people who have made great sacrifice, but yet you turn around and get on your page, you know, well, what about the pages before you even got to this? Remember them nomads? Yeah, them nomads, them nomads, yeah. Them nomads have been doing a lot of work, you see, but yet you just reaping the rewards, you know. So always remember that when you jump down on that knee, that there's somebody who made it possible for you, you know, and you might need to find you another platform to do that, you know. And then you have the situation, you know, with Nipsey Hussle, you know. See, a lot of this all comes together. It all comes together, you know. But if Nipsey Hussle, you know, is any type of a foundation, you know, that's wonderful. But Harry Gines is here to tell you to get up off your knee. Okay, I have not done anything to speak on Nipsey Hussle at all. You know, I want the mourning, you know, to rest in peace. It would be inappropriate for me to come right behind something that traumatic within that neighborhood and within the country to be trying to ride off of it. I'm not trying to ride off of it, no. But what I will say, we have to keep going. Okay, whether women, children, men, the family, everybody has to keep going, you know, and that's from my heart as a veteran. You know, that's how I feel about it. You know, it happened, it's a tragedy, you know, and we're gonna try to do better. And that's what, you know, my presentation hopefully is being received that way. Let me get to some film and see if I can just touch you that way. Stand by. Remember I told you we're going to be fast forwarding. We're going to be doing a time travel here. It's going to be a time travel. We're going to fast forward.
Watch the first martyrs of America's struggle for freedom. Since the founding of American colonies, tensions between the colonists and the British troops had been building. On March 5th, 1770, these tensions exploded into violence. British troops opened fire on an angry Boston crowd. A drawing by Paul Revere records this pivotal instant in American history, the Boston Massacre. The first to fall was Crispus Attucks, an escaped slave, a black man. This was the beginning. Revolution became inevitable. The colonial army needed men, but General George Washington did not want black men. Despite Washington's official policy, Negroes willingly fought against the British. The British officer who ordered the shot heard round the world at Lexington, Major Pitcairn, was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill by a colonial sharpshooter. His name? Peter Salem. He was a black man. While General Washington discouraged Negro enlistments, the British promised freedom to any slave who would join the Loyalist cause. This was the first of many attempts to undermine Negro support in American wars. Although the British had only limited success, General Washington was alarmed, and he called for an active recruitment of black freemen. When Washington crossed the Delaware on Christmas Day, 1776, two Negroes were with him, Oliver Cromwell and Prince Whipple. Nearly 5,000 black men fought in the American Revolution. In 1813, the young America was at war again. Captain Oliver Hazard Perry didn't want Negro sailors, but the Battle of Lake Erie changed his mind. He later said, "They seemed absolutely insensible to danger. An act of Congress had restricted the Navy to able-bodied white males, but black sailors fought and died aboard American warships." In 1814, General Andrew Jackson actively recruited black soldiers for the defense of New Orleans. Until then, fear of slave revolts in the South had restricted black participation in the war. More than 600 free Negroes helped hold strategic positions against the British assault. Jackson's appeal had been to black men who were free. Most Negroes were still slaves. By 1860, growing pains had begun to split the nation. Slavery was a public symbol for the deep problems that led to the Civil War. At first, it was a white man's war. 11 days after Confederate troops opened fire on Fort Sumter, a free Negro volunteered to fight for the Union and was refused. The official policy in the North said that Negro slaves were contraband, captured property, not potential fighting men. President Lincoln feared the loss of border state support if he used black troops in the war. And meanwhile, from all over the North came offers of black regiments. From the South came escaped slaves who were willing to join the fight for freedom. Bearing the scars of slavery, a few were allowed to serve. They became symbols of new hope for black men, both slave and free. After months of costly and indecisive fighting, the North began to recruit Negro troops. There was an all-out war, and military necessity overruled racial politics. By June 1862, the first Negro combat unit, called the Corps d'Afrique, the African Corps, was organized. Black sailors were mixed with white seamen aboard fighting ships on both sides. The Union's Mississippi Squadron reported more than 800 black sailors. Negro sailors were aboard the ironclad Monitor when it fought the Merrimack. One Black River pilot, Robert Smalls, became a Union hero when he delivered his Confederate gunboat and its slave crew to the Union fleet. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The United States Armed Forces were officially open to all Negroes. Freedom, however, did not bring equality. The Civil War ended slavery, but marked the beginning of a segregated American military. Segregated Negro units were called United States Colored Troops. Former slaves clashed with slave owners. At Milkins Bend, Louisiana, 1,000 black soldiers fought 2,000 white Texans in fierce hand-to-hand combat, but were finally overrun. Most black troops were non-combatants. They were laborers, cooks, and teamsters. There were also spies, couriers, and scouts. By the end of the war, 186,000 Negroes had joined the Union Army. Even the South had passed the Negro Enlistment Bill in 1864, but it was too late. More than 500,000 Americans died in the Civil War. 38,000 of them were black. After the war, 4 all-Negro regiments were organized and sent to frontier forts on the Western Plains. Their officers, of course, were all white. Saturday afternoon at the local movie house, most Americans learned that the taming of the Wild West was a matter of the white man versus the redskin. Few history books record the fact that when the cavalry moved to the rescue, troopers were often black. Black troopers died with General Custer at the Little Bighorn. They helped run Sitting Bull into Canada, chased desperados like Billy the Kid, and captured the Apache chief Geronimo. These are some of the real troopers who fought the Indians on the Western Plain. 14 of them won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Savannah Harbor, February 15, 1898. 30 Negroes were aboard the battleship Maine that night. 20 lost their lives. When the Spanish-American War broke out, black troops were called from the frontier and shipped to Cuba. Within months, the all-Negro 10th Cavalry had saved Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders at Las Guasimas. Black soldiers played their most important role to date in the Spanish-American War. Black troopers fought at El Caney and joined the Rough Riders in the charge of San Juan Hill. "I want no better men beside me in battle than these colored troopers," said Colonel Roosevelt. But 7 years later, as president, Roosevelt court-martialed 3 companies of the all-Negro 25th Infantry when there was violence in Brownsville, Texas, due to discrimination against black troops. Tough and independent black soldiers refused to conform to servile white stereotypes. White hostility in Houston, Texas, 11 years later, provoked an even bloodier clash. Black soldiers of the 24th Regiment shot up the town, killing 17 whites. The result was a mass murder trial. 13 Negro soldiers were hanged and 41 sentenced to life imprisonment. When the United States entered World War I, Americans said they would make the world safe for democracy. The country mobilized, but Negro enlistments were restricted. Once again, however, manpower needs overruled racial prejudice. The Army's highest-ranking Negro officer, Colonel Charles Young, was retired as physically unfit for duty, even though he rode horseback from Ohio to Washington, D.C. to prove his fitness. The American military remained segregated, and most black troops were commanded by whites. General John J. Pershing, commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, earned his nickname Blackjack as a commander of Negro troops before World War I. Pershing had no objections to black combat troops, but many high-ranking officers and government officials publicly questioned the black man's ability to fight. During the war, more than 370,000 Negroes were in uniform, 40,000 on the front lines. Most black soldiers were relegated to service units. They were laborers, ditch diggers, and stevedores. Now, the 1st Negro Combat Division overseas, the 93rd, went into battle April 1918, fighting under French command. Homegrown discrimination followed black soldiers into the trenches. One document widely circulated in France openly declared that Negroes were inferior to whites. Despite this discrimination, black combat units fought well. The 369th Regiment saw 191 straight days of frontline action and never lost a foot of ground. Black troops won many combat awards, and they were the first to win the highest French military honor, the Croix de Guerre. For most Americans, however, the black combat record was obscured by controversy. One black regiment under American command was accused of sneaking to the rear. A government investigation found no basis for widespread criticism of Negro troops, but within 4 months after the armistice, all black troops were shipped home. Negro troops had been well received by the French, but exaggerated reports of black soldiers raping French women prompted American officials to get black troops out of Europe. In New York, Negro veterans were marched up Fifth Avenue through cheering crowds. Back home to Harlem. During the years between the two wars, Negro troops were reduced to less than 3% of the armed forces. After World War II broke out in Europe, America began a new mobilization. The 1940 Selective Service Act said there would be no racial discrimination in the selection and training of America's armed forces, but the military maintained its tradition of segregation. Public figures like Joe Louis became symbols for the recruitment of the black American Army. Military thinking still relegated most Negroes to labor battalions, but some were trained for combat duties, even elite units. Elite, but separate. The pattern was clear. There were going to be 2 armies, 2 navies, and 2 air forces. One white, the other black. The military reflected a racially divided America. The armed forces felt that their job was to fight, not to lead social reform. Black America's Air Force began training on the Alabama campus of Tuskegee Institute. The 99th Pursuit Squadron was activated in 1941 under the first Negro West Point graduate since 1889, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. One of the first American heroes of World War II was Dorie Miller, a Navy mess steward at Pearl Harbor. Dorie shot down 4 attacking Japanese planes and won the Navy Cross. 3 years later, Dorie Miller was killed in action. He was still a mess steward. Most Negroes in the Navy were messmen, and change came slowly. The Black American Navy in February 1944 included 2 anti-submarine vessels with all Negro crews. Their officers, with one exception, were white. The absurdity of a Navy within a Navy finally led Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal to order the integration of all naval vessels. Most of the fighting in the Pacific fell to the Marine Corps, and for 167 years the Marine Corps was all white. And in 1942 the Corps began enlisting black fighting men for the first time. As manpower needs went up, resistance to black troops went down. Segregation, however, remained. Military leaders argued that segregation reduced racial friction. In fact, it intensified it. During the war, there were racial incidents at home and overseas, from the defense plants of Detroit to base camps in Guam. In the Pacific, Negroes worked and fought at Guadalcanal, Okinawa, and Iwo Jima. Death and suffering made no racial distinctions. The 99th Pursuit Squadron represented a major departure from the military policy of using Negroes, mostly as service troops. It was a token gesture. After years of pressure, black men were finally allowed to prove that they could perform the complex jobs of a modern military machine. The 99th established one of the best combat records of the war. Other all-Negro Air Corps units followed, and in all, 95 black pilots won the Distinguished Flying Cross. Two all-Negro infantry divisions served overseas, the 93rd in the Pacific and the 92nd in Italy. Public officials, military men, war correspondents closely watched the 92nd's performance. On February 14, 1945, elements of the division were accused of melting away in the face of German resistance. Lack of faith between black troops and their white officers and a confused chain of command weakened the 92nd. Morale was often low. 90% of the unit scored poorly on military intelligence tests, and many had not been trained with their basic weapon, the M1 rifle. 542 Bronze Stars and many other combat awards were earned by the men of the 92nd. But controversy marred their record. One Negro officer wrote after the war, "When I think of what the 92nd might have been, I'm heartsick." The controversial record of the 92nd was widely publicized, although it was only one of the 4,000 black units that served during World War II. The German counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, broke through Allied lines, advancing toward the Rhine. It also resulted in a breakthrough in American Army racial policies. 2,500 black volunteers were integrated into white companies on the front. Germans forced the first large-scale racial integration of the American Army. And after the battle was won, most of the Negro volunteers were returned to their segregated units. More than 1 million Negroes served in the American Armed Forces during World War II, half of them overseas. Black soldiers landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day. Negro anti-aircraft units fought on Normandy Beach, in Italy, and in North Africa. Black engineers worked on the Lido Road in Burma, the Stillwell Road in China, and linked Alaska and Canada with the Alcan Highway. At Anzio, black engineers unloaded nearly 2,000 tons of supplies under fire. More than half of the drivers in the famous Red Ball Express were Negroes. Black troops served all across Europe and throughout the Pacific. Many were decorated for bravery in combat. With the end of the war, America began to reassess the racial policies of the military. The enormous manpower needs of the war effort had already threatened racial segregation in the armed forces. Brigadier General Benjamin O. Davis Sr., the military's highest-ranking black officer, began his career as a private in the Spanish-American War. His was a lonely career. A new era in the history of the Negro and the armed forces was about to begin. The black community had grown far more militant in its demands for racial equality. Black veterans came home and joined a new fight, the fight for civil rights. In October 1947, a National Commission on Civil Rights formed by Harry Truman called for a new government program dedicated to the elimination of racial segregation from American life. On July 26, 1948, President Truman signed a historic executive order. He declared, "There shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed forces without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin." The job of changing a century-old military tradition of racial segregation began. At first there was resistance. The Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, and Secretary of the Air Force, Stuart Symington, strongly supported the new program. "We're going to end segregation," Symington told the generals. "You've got to stop this double talk and act." War in Korea hastened the breakdown of America's segregated armed forces. By 1953, only 5% of Negro enlisted men remained in all black units. The percentage of Negro officers in the Army had doubled. One military report announced, "Efficiency has been increased, disciplinary problems reduced, and morale improved." Historic all-Negro units were integrated with white troops. A year before it was integrated, the 24th Infantry Regiment added a final victory to its 81-year history. Black soldiers of the 24th captured the city of Yekchan, our first major victory of the Korean War. For the most part, the history of the Korean War was not a history of white troops or black troops. In the military, an order is an order, and the American armed forces have been ordered to integrate. By the end of the war, the military found itself in the forefront of the civil rights movement. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court handed down its historic school desegregation decision. The armed forces had ordered its civilian schools desegregated 4 months before. American soldiers returning from Korea had not only fought a war, they had lived an experiment. The success of racial integration in the military was an undeniable fact. For many Americans, both white and black, the impersonal discipline of an integrated armed forces was their first experience of racial equality. little more than a decade later, America was at war again. The carrier Kitty Hawk launches airstrikes against the North Vietnam. In the war in Vietnam, black and white fighting men are fully integrated. 11% of the American population is black. In Vietnam, Negroes are about 20% of the frontline forces. Even more are in elite units. 14% of the Americans killed in Vietnam are Negroes. Young black fighting men along the DMZ and in the jungles around Saigon say, we're proving ourselves. But there's already 200 years of proof. The irony is that many of these young blacks and many white Americans think that this war in Vietnam is the first time black men have fought in an American war. The purpose of this has been to set the record straight.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That piece was something that the clarity, the sound, if you were here, in my home right now, then you would be able to say, oh, that's really nice. I could see all of that. But the technology, like I said, I'm on the cutting edge of something. So I hope that you can bear through that. If it's not from the clarity of the picture, maybe you can get something from the audio. But I have other films coming. This is only the beginning. That's all this is. This is just the beginning and trying to do some upgrading. Now, I do know that you can take a 16 millimeter film and then you could place it on DVD, but that's not what I'm really wanting to do. Because like I said, if we were in the same area, you wouldn't have the same opinion that you would about this film as far as the clarity is concerned. It'll go. I can work with this, especially, like I said, if we were face to face in the same room and things like that, your opinion would be different. But again, you have only so much clarity that you can get from one device to another. So what I'm saying is that there is a vision that I have, and I pretty much manifested it, because now I can take this film and I can even produce it on a large screen like a drive-in theater, you see. So if you've got, a large structure, large, any kind of billboard, this film would show. And again, if you were in that area where it would be showing, your opinion of what you would be looking at would be a little different than what it would be from device to device. That's what I'm saying. So no, this is a very historical film, and I'm looking forward for it to be approved by YouTube, so that in future years it would be a clear path for all women of the world to understand that it is a big decision when it comes to the military. It really is. So be aware, stay woke, and just, if you feel sometimes that you can't do something about a situation, always give it your best effort, and from then maybe you might be heard. This is Harry Gines, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and there will be many more to come. Thank you for listening.